fairly complicated. There's a lot of other considerations and logistics that student services in general will need to be aware of. Also, students will need to be aware of the changes that will be forthcoming out of this initiative. The Student Success Act really is just the first official beginning of many of the other recommendations. So I hope to be able to illustrate some of the effects on students and other administrators and instructors and counselors, but primarily it's in the context for career counseling. Let me start by sort of the 30,000 mile level, I guess. Back in 1960, when the California Master Plan for Higher Education was passed, one of the fundamental principles was that, was that all California residents with the ability to benefit should have access to higher education. Open access was one of the very fundamental principles of the California community college system, and we're very successful at access. Millions of students attend our colleges every year. Last year, over 2.7 million, and that's down from a couple of years before when the funding got cut. So we've been very, very successful at access. The problem is that when you measure traditional outcomes, they don't calculate very well because our denominators are so large. When you look at the number of students who complete degrees, who transfer, and who career advancement, that type of thing, it doesn't come out as a very high percentage overall because such of a large denominator. There's been a movement lately in the country towards evidence-based decision-making and increased fiscal accountability. Back in the 80s, a lot of initiatives like Deming and total quality management, continuous improvement, a lot of things that were implemented into manufacturing have now evolved and are being applied to social and educational programs. So measurable outcomes become critical, especially to justify the expenditure of public dollars. So the California legislature made it very apparent that they expected the California Community College to show improvement, increased positive outcomes for students. So a task force was formed in January 2011, and they came out with recommendations in January of 12, and these recommendations were approved by the Board of Governors. And this action marked the Board of Governors' commitment to launch a major system-wide initiative called the Student Success Initiative. Now, the way that initiatives move into practice are through laws and regulations. So in the spring, Senator Lowenthal introduced Senate Bill 1456. And this initiative, it outlines strategies to provide students with improved support and institutional structures to help them succeed. Now, the recommendations from the task force, there were 8 areas of focus, and there were 22 recommendations. So these are the 8 areas of focus, and you can see they're quite broad, and there were 22 recommendations. Now, at least 9 of these are in some form of initial implementation. There's effort being initiated right now with K-12 on the Common Core state standards, collaboration with the community college system. The statewide common assessment is moving forward. The statewide enrollment priorities, I'm going to be speaking about that a little bit later. That's under really a regulatory change, not the law. Improved system leadership. There's a bill, Senate Bill 1062, is still out there. Don't know whether that'll move forward or not, but it is still out there, and that has to do with leadership in the state system office, the chancellor's office. The Student Success Scorecard, we'll hear a little bit about that later. And then longitudinal student record system. Efforts are being made on those 6 things. 3 of the 9 efforts are in Senate Bill 1456. And those are the mandated services, the BOG Fee Waiver and conditions related to that, and the investment in the Student Support Initiative. The bill also links funding to 2 of those other things I just mentioned, the Student Success Scorecard, which basically in the bill it says that if you want to receive the funding, you will participate in the student success scorecard. And also centralized assessment. Again, in the bill it says if you want to receive these funds, you will participate in statewide central assessment when it becomes reality. So those are the two links. The bill basically provides a policy framework. This is how initiatives become law. And so it delineates the legislator's intent that we align the matriculation language of the Student Success Task Force recommendations to services needed to support students in developing an informed educational goal, developing their ed plans, and declaring a course of study. It also establishes that student success is a shared responsibility between the institution and the student, supported by well-coordinated, evidence-based student and instructional services. I'm going to mention later, but I don't want to miss it in case I forget. The piece about the student responsibility is really, really important to students. It really is a huge cultural shift for many of us, and students in particular. So I'm going to come back to that later. It also targets funding on core services, initially orientation assessment and the development of a career education plan with counseling. So it required the Board of Governors to adopt policies to mandate those services along with processes for exemption and appeals. It requires BOG fee students to meet conditions and requirements and the BOG to establish a reasonable implementation period based on resources. We've heard a lot of discussion about matriculation was underfunded for years. Then we had a huge budget cut back in 08-09. We've already heard discussion around the state that the logistics that are involved here will also require additional funding. So I'll mention right now that throughout the bill you'll see language about reasonable phased-in implementation based on resources available to do that. So let's take a look at a quick summary here. It renames the Seymour-Campbell Matriculation Act of 1986 to the Seymour-Campbell Student Success Act of 2012. So there's a name change. It targets new students. So initially the focus will be on new to community college students. Focuses on students enrolling for degrees, certificates, transfer, and career advancement. Those are the positive outcomes that the legislature would like to see us increase. So that's the focus. It encourages on the use of technology to effectively serve more students, mandates the core services, and targets the funding to orientation, assessment, counseling, and the development of an education plan. Shared institutional and student responsibility. It incentivizes positive student academic performance and progress. Later on I'll be mentioning that there are in fact interventions and or consequences as a result of failure to do that successful performance. It links to the student equity plan. Many of us around the state have a concern that this new student success initiative could proportionately affect some students. So the bill does include caveat that we have to track disproportionate impact and make adjustments if we determine that anybody is adversely affected. There's the link to the statewide common assessment and accountability scorecard and the phased-in implementation of the project based on resource availability. It also delineates the institutional and student responsibilities. So the institutional responsibilities. The program of services funded through the Student Success Act, which shall be known and can be cited as the Student Success and Support Program. So we've gone from initiative to act to program. Shall include but not be limited to all the following: orientation, assessment before course registration, counseling and other educational planning services, which shall include but not necessarily be limited to counseling and advising, assisting in the exploration of educational and career interests, aptitudes, and identification of objectives, the provision of information guided by sound counseling practices and principles that will enable the student to make informed choices, and the development of an education plan. Referral to specialized support services as needed and available, and evaluation of students' progress and referral to appropriate interventions. One thing I want to mention right up front, in case it's not apparent, the orientation and assessment, the counseling and advising to identify a goal, and the establishment of the ed plan are to occur prior to registration. So these are pre-enrollment services, and this is usually where the questions come up about logistics. How are we going to do this? And those are very good questions. We're going to talk about some strategies at the end, but most of us know the applications come out for the fall in February for the spring registration for fall, and they come out in September for the spring semester. So essentially, once those applications come out, students get an ID number. That's when we need to ensure that the orientation assessment, the advising, and the ed plan all occur before those registration periods start in late April and November. So timing is a critical factor in planning for the Student Success Initiative. Student responsibilities under the agreement include, but are not necessarily limited to, and this is in the law: identification of an academic or career goal upon application, the declaration of a specific course of study after a specified period of time, or unit accumulation as defined by the Board of Governors, diligence in class attendance, completion of assigned coursework, and completion of courses, and maintenance of academic progress toward an educational goal and course of study as identified in the ed plan. So, you know, the attendance and completion of coursework, we've always expected that of students. However, we've been pretty generous about progress towards educational goal, stopping, starting, stopping again, starting again, that type of thing. What's very different is this culture and this procedure and requirement that students declare a goal upon application. Initially, that'll be very broad. I'm thinking right now, from what I'm hearing, it's really more or less just transfer, a degree, a certificate, or career advancement. That's really not so different. I'm hoping they're going to improve the application. Right now, students have about 16 different choices. Hopefully we can get that down to something more reasonable and less confusing, but that'll be the broad goal. The more specific they can be, however, the better. That's why a lot of this has to happen before they even get to this point, hopefully in that pre-enrollment period or even back in high school or sooner. The other part that's very new in different cultures is tracking of academic progress with some type of intervention or consequences for failure to maintain positive progress. This is one of the first places we see that show up. BOG Fee Waiver. Under SB 1456, there are now conditions on eligibility for the BOG Fee Waiver. Students must meet academic and progress standards as defined by the BOG. So phased in over a reasonable period of time, requires adequate and reasonable notification for students. What this essentially means is that if a student does not remain in good standing, if they go into academic or progress probation for 2 consecutive terms, they will lose their BOG fee eligibility this following semester. We actually will have to notify students at risk of losing their eligibility in advance. For the very first round, this stuff goes live for the fall 2014 semester, so spring registration 2014. We're actually having to notify students about these impacts beginning in spring of 2013. So they won't necessarily be affected by that time, but we need to make sure we're in the right process and procedures for notifying students. So this is going to come up this next spring, that we have to start thinking about how we do this. Hopefully this will answer some of those questions that may be popping in. This is the timeline, and again, this is becoming more and more firm as we move forward. So SB 1456 is in effect as of January 1. Governor Brown signed the bill in September, goes into effect January 1. There are implementation work groups being convened right now at the state level to look at what revisions are needed to Title V, how we need to revise our management information systems to gather the appropriate data and the data elements. There's also a committee working right now on the budget allocation formula. So the MIS and budget allocation formula has already met twice. The regulatory committee has met, I think, at least once. They're scheduled to meet again before the first of the year. This stuff is moving very, very quickly. Now, all of the recommended changes in regulations being made by these groups and the funding formula will come to the statewide matriculation advisory committee. There's information. I'm going to give you a link later to go to the state chancellor's website to see who sits on these committees and how you can contact them. But all of these regulatory and funding formula changes will get further review. They'll go to the Matriculation Advisory Committee, they'll go out to the various constituent groups, and they must go through the consultative process in the community college system, which is a consultation council that advises the state chancellor. So this will occur in a series of steps, but they're moving pretty quickly on this. Their hope is to have all of this done by May of 2013. That's a pretty tall order. Assuming they get all this done, then year 2013 or 14 becomes the district and college level planning year. That's when we're supposed to develop our student success plan. We begin to implement the MIS changes to make sure our reporting systems are in place. Our allocations will remain the same. Essentially, it's your matriculation allocation, just with a new name. So nothing will change in your allocation formula other than the regular state budget changes, which I don't foresee big changes in that for the next year or so. Funding will be targeted to the core services of orientation, assessment, counseling, and advising, however. So at the local level, starting in July 2013, you will need to use your matriculation funding for these purposes. CBOs need to be fully aware of the implications to your local district or college, because I'm guessing there will be some. The other thing I want to stress is that even though we have that whole year to do the implementation, you have to remember that registration starts in spring of 2014. Students are going to start getting those applications in February, and they're going to start coming in for services. You pretty much need to know how you're going to handle those students well before the year is up. So I would not waste any time. I would start planning now so that when you get ready to start putting pen to paper, you already have a pretty good idea of what you're going to do. The state is planning to do probably a 2-day workshop next October to roll out the new requirements to the field. We've always had new directors training. This will be a more open training. Colleges may be invited to send teams, which is a great idea, to come to the training, most likely a couple of days. Don't know anything more about locations or costs or anything yet, but we're looking at probably next October to get that done. But again, I would not wait to start my planning for those types of events. Fiscal year 2014-15 is the district college level implementation year 1. So by that time, your plan's been submitted, your budgets have been submitted. We're continuing to track how the MIS system is working, and they'll give you feedback on that so you can check to make sure it's working. Allocations, again, will remain consistent. They will not apply the new formula yet. And the first report will have to go to the legislature in July 2014. Fiscal year 2015-16. The fiscal year 15-16 allocations will be based on the data reported from 14-15. So the new formula does include, or will include when they finish it, service levels for things like orientation, assessment, and counseling with the ed plans. So that's a piece of the allocation formula. But again, that committee is just meeting now. No recommendations have been made officially. Nothing's finalized. But in 15-16, your funding will be based on the new allocation formula. Implementation year 3, 2016-17, the allocations will be based on the 14-15 data, and another legislative report is due. So by then, we should all have this wired, and we're just rolling forward year after year after year. So that's the timeline right now, best as we know it. I want to switch up a little bit to go to the statewide enrollment priority regulatory change. This is part of the Student Success Task Force recommendations, but it is not part of Senate Bill 1456. But the implementation is consistent with implementation with the Senate Bill 1456, and it does have specific ramifications for students and for the colleges. So if you take a look at this flow chart, it shows that this is a change to Title V. This regulatory change has already been made. It's in Department of Finance right now for final approval, but it will occur. And it does go into effect for the spring registration 2014 for the fall 2014 registration semester. And the way the state has set this up is in 3 large groups. The first group are active duty military and veterans, current and former foster youth who are new and fully matriculated or continuing in good standing. This group is identified under Education Code, state law, so they get first priority. You might note, though, that they must be, the new and fully matriculated and continuing students must be in good standing. So make note of that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The second priority group is those identified under Title V, which is regulation, and that's the new and continuing fully matriculated EOPS and DSPS students in good standing. And the third group are continuing students in good standing, and the new fully matriculated students, those are the students that have completed the orientation, assessment, and counseling and have developed those ed plans. Then after that, the district, you have the flexibility to set additional priorities and or categories for other students. So they don't define anything beyond that for other groups that you might currently give priority to. A couple of things to note over on the right, or over on the left side, the academic conditions. There's a 100-unit threshold written into this regulation. So any student with more than 100 units gets lesser priority. Their enrollment priority will drop below these 3 groups. Up to you to define how low it drops. And districts and colleges will have the opportunity of making an exemption, for example, students with high unit majors. So that's written in there that you can do exemptions for certain student groups. The other thing to note, and very significant, is that students in all the groups must be in good standing. So if you go on to academic or progress probation for 2 consecutive terms, you lose enrollment priority. And I really want to emphasize this includes veterans, foster youth, DSPS, and EOPS students, as well as continuing students. So this is why I say there's a huge cultural shift here going on under the Student Success Act. This is real accountability for students to maintain good academic standing and progress towards their goal. They stand to lose enrollment priority if they don't. A couple things on the groups. Over on the right side, you'll see that districts do have flexibility to collapse the 2 priority groups 1 and 2. In my district, we do that. Those groups all have, they're in one single group. However, you've got to make sure that you're not displacing any students in the first group. So it depends on your numbers. You'll have to look at your numbers at your own district and college. But we have collapsed those in my district. Secondly, and what's been already a big discussion in my district, is you have flexibility within Group 3 to set priorities and additional categories within that group. So, for example, we've recently given athletes a higher priority. So of the continuing students, they're going to come in further up. We also have priority for continuing students based on the units they've completed. We'd like to get those that are close to finishing into the classes they need, so we give them a little higher priority. But again, you've got flexibility to set priorities. If you want to move the new fully matriculated students up above continuing, you can do that. If you want to give students who are in their final term higher priority, you can do that. I can tell you there are robust conversations going on around the colleges and districts in the state about priority within Group 3. After that, you can create new priorities, advanced education, for example, transfer students, non-matriculated new students. That's all within your own purview. So again, this goes into effect in spring of 2014 for the fall 2014 semester. However, this spring, 2013, you have to notify the groups that would have been affected by the new requirements. They really want us to begin to message students really early about these changes and how they may have been impacted and will be impacted in the future. So that's very different than the past. So let's talk a little bit more about the logistics of the Student Success Act. So first question, do you have the capacity at your college to provide the mandated services to all new students? This is probably the question I get asked most often. How do we do this? Well, the state doesn't really articulate how we do it. They sort of say this is what you need to do and by when. And it's up to those of us out here in the field to have the discussions about how we do it and do it effectively and efficiently. But you should begin to take a look at your own data. This is some data from Daniel Martinez. It was based on statewide MIS data for 3 years. And this is just to give you some idea of how many first-time students showed up in the statewide data. These are pretty big numbers, 36%, 31%, 32%. At my college, it's a little less than that, but again, I just want to put this up here to encourage you to go out and look at your own data. You absolutely have to know how many new first-time students you will potentially need to serve. Here's again some statewide data from Daniel's study that shows how many students received each of these services for this period of years. Fall 8 to 10 and fall 8 to 10 the count in percent. So you can see for these SEPs that's pretty low. Counseling about 30%, orientation 46%, assessment 60%. Logically that's a little higher because people need it for prerequisites. But these are all fairly low if you consider that they become mandated and all new students will be 100%. And over time, eventually all students, continuing students, will have their ed plans in place. So over 3-4 years, they'll all have ed plans. This is also based on state MIS data, which anyone who knows about state MIS data knows right now it's pretty fuzzy data. So these numbers are probably low. The student education plan is going to take on huge significance under the Student Success Initiative. This is a definition from the Student Success Task Force recommendations. Every student enrolls to pursue a certificate, degree, or transfer objective, and even those seeking career advancement needs a student ed plan that represents the sequence of courses that can get them from their starting point to the attainment of their educational goal. Students who arrive without a clear goal need an education plan that allows them to systematically define their education needs and objectives and explore their options. Data has shown that students who have an ed plan succeed at higher rates than those who do not. It only makes sense. If you have a goal, you have a better sense of where you're going and what it takes to get there. This will also be one of the tools for colleges and districts to determine whether students are making successful progress towards achievement of their goal. So again, the ed plan is going to take on a lot more significance. A lot of people ask, well, what is the ed plan? Is it first semester? Is it 6 semesters? Is it? That hasn't been defined as of yet. So we don't really know. But those of us that work in the field, counselors maybe even more than most, know that many of our students come to us without a goal. Here's the statewide data from the same study. Actually, this came from Patrick Perry. And again, it's based on statewide data. Degree seeking, okay, maybe up to 43% in 10-11, non-degree 29, undecided 27.8. My counselors tell me that that's probably low. A lot of students will put a goal down on their application because they feel they need to, or they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing. But when they come into counseling, they very frequently will say, I don't really know. And even if they say they want to transfer, they haven't decided on a major or an institution that they want to transfer to. So the undecided unknown is probably a very low figure, and we all know that they change their minds pretty frequently. Under the Student Success Act, students must have a goal. They've got to identify an academic or a career goal upon application. Degree, transfer certificate, career advancement, something probably pretty broad initially, but the more specific the better. At an as yet to be designated point in time, they will need to declare a specific course of study. Right now, every conversation I'm hearing at the state is that this will be based on accumulated units, not semesters. That's a good thing, because we know students some take more units than others, some are more successful than others, some take a lot of remedial courses and non-credit classes and those don't apply, by the way, but it can delay their time to making a specific, more focused goal. So it'll probably be based on a unit total. But at that point in time, their ed plan is going to start to get pretty specific in terms of what they need to do and what classes they need. They have to maintain academic progress towards that educational goal and course of study as it's identified in their ed plan. Students are always going to change their minds, so that ed plan is going to be kind of a living document. It's going to follow the student continuously. Those of you that are in the counseling department need to be aware that a lot of focus right now is being placed on developing the ed plan. But let's not forget that they'll have to be updated at least once a year, if not once a semester. So the workload will continue for all students after this plan is initiated. We also are going to be evaluating their progress and refer them to appropriate interventions. It says for students enrolled in basic skills courses who have not declared a goal or who are on academic probation as defined by the Board of Governors standards. So what I'm seeing at my college is early intervention is a good thing. The earlier the better. 60% of my students who are on progress probation 1, the first semester they do it, don't return the following semester. They've completed 12 units, but they slip into progress probation and they stop out, which leads me to believe they probably didn't have a very clearly defined goal and maybe weren't fully committed. Those on academic probation 1, about 40% stop out. So again, we're working here at my college to try to intervene much earlier to try to help those students. So who are our students? This is, again, I've put up some statewide data on race and ethnicity, gender, enrollment status, and age group. We know for a fact that we have a lot of first-generation, first-time college students. We know that the majority are academically unprepared. If you look at the basic skills data that we've been looking at for the last 5-6 years, anywhere from 70 to 90% don't assess into college level reading, math, or writing. So we know that a large number are not prepared academically. Large numbers are economically disadvantaged, taking advantage of the BOG Fee Waiver, the federal and state financial aid, which is getting more and more strict as that goes on. Working at least part-time, many full-time. They have a variety of health and wellness issues. We have mental health problems, and that's increasing. And there's also a lot of social and lifestyle issues affecting our students. I put this slide up here not because you need to go by this data, but again to encourage you to go get your own data. Figure out who your students are. Try to anticipate what their greatest challenges will be. Even asking the students right now, better to do it now and get that perspective to help you prepare your pre-enrollment services and address some of these issues before students get into the system, get into your programs, and start struggling and then require intervention. So the earlier you can begin to identify who your students are, the better. Also, remember, we're going to have to see who might be disproportionately impacted. So the more you know about your students and who's being impacted, the better. For those institutional research people out there, several new requirements for data tracking in the bill. So they're mostly related to disproportionate impact and to measuring the outcomes that are on the new scorecard. So researchers want to go take a look at that. Career counselors, in my opinion, are the professionals with the knowledge and experience that's going to be needed to assist students in making these informed choices about their goal. So the challenge really is, how do we get this many students into and through a meaningful process of career planning within the established time frames? I don't have a lot of answers for that right now. I want to get this out to all of you so we can begin to have that discussion and do some planning and throw out ideas and try to come up with the best strategies possible for these time frames. And even if we accomplish this, we know it's not going to be a one-time decision. So this is where it drops into the presenter's opinion. For me, decision-making is an absolute must in any college preparation programs, in any college success courses or programs, in any college transition programs, in the middle school, in the high school, and right on through. Students have to learn how to be able to make good, informed decisions on their own. We simply aren't going to have the time and the resources to continuously hold their hands every time they need to pick classes. We just aren't going to be able to do it. Conscious decision-making is an essential skill for making choices and setting goals. We make decisions every moment of the day. When I did the presentations and the keynotes, I looked around the room and I said, gee, everybody in the room seems to be dressed today. Somehow we all managed to figure out, what clothes we were going to wear, and we showed up with our clothes on. And actually, we went through a process when we did that. We looked at our options. We evaluated the consequences. We did some valuing and some weighting in that. Ultimately, we picked some things out. We put them on. Maybe we even changed our mind a few times. And then we showed up with our clothes on. And then we assessed, gee, did somebody tell me I look good today? Did it accomplish what I thought it would? So we do this almost unconsciously all the time. But students need to learn to do it consciously so that when we come up to these big decisions about buying a house, buying a car, going to college, picking a career, deciding on a major, we understand that it's a skill. It's something we can learn. Make the process visible to the student as you guide them through it. So here's some of the basics that I try to use and keep real simple when I work with my Career Center folks here and our counselors. Define the situation and your goals. Research and identify alternatives. Compare the options and the consequences, including the consequence of not making a decision. Reflect and rank your options. That's valuing. That's a personal thing. Then make a decision. and design and implement an action plan like an SCP, and then evaluate the results of your decision. Is it taking you where you wanted to go? You can always make changes, but establish that goal, get a plan in place, and start to follow it. Mapping these things on paper helps students visualize the process, and it helps build the skill of making good decisions. So let's shift now to opportunities. And this is where I hope you begin the dialogue on your campus and in your districts. Work with your K-12 partners to better prepare students for college on all levels. Instructional faculty working on the academic skills, reading, writing, math, research, curriculum alignment, and coordinate assessment practices. We don't need to wait for the state to finish the Common Core curriculum. We don't need to wait for them to complete the work on Smarter Balance, which is a new assessment that'll be aligned with the Common Core standards. Those are going to be fabulous tools to have and when they complete them. But we all know these things can take years. My college, we're sitting down right now with our main feeder schools, and we're having the conversation with the math faculty, the English faculty, the ESL faculty on aligning our curriculum. How can we better prepare students to move into college? Let's not forget about the personal skills. My college transition program spends as much time talking about self-responsibility, self-management, decision-making, time management, study skills, and appreciating diversity as it does on academic preparation. Students need these skills when they get to college. The earlier we can begin to integrate these into what they're doing in their classes in middle school and high school, the better prepared they're going to be when they come to the community college. The cognitive skills of analysis, reasoning, interpretation, problem solving, being inquisitive, the foundation of research. Again, the sooner we can build these into programs at the high school and middle school level, the better prepared these students are going to be. Work with our K-12 partners to get these things integrated into what they're doing. Start earlier to identify career options and teach decision making. I don't know about in your areas, but in my area, when the budget cuts hit the K-12 system, many of the career counseling professionals and specialists in the high schools were cut. We're fortunate enough that some of them retained those professionals. In other cases, the job just fell to the regular K-12 counselors. In any event, as early as possible, begin to identify what the student's career options may be, even if it's just what you like, what you don't like, and begin to come at it from that aspect. If you can put a formal process in place, something like the California Career Cafe model, where students can explore and begin to focus their interests and abilities and talents into career areas, even better. Develop high school transition programs, Summer Bridge, First Year Experience Program. Long Beach is doing a great program down there right now, the Long Beach Promise. My college has one. We call it a College Connection. I'm sure that many of you are already doing this. Summer Bridge. They're going to already be enrolled by then, so bear in mind the pre-enrollment services can't wait for Summer Bridge. But we could do a heck of a job on additional orientation, how to use your electronic services, how to use services on campus, how to study. There's a lot of other things that could be done. And let's carry those things on into the first year. I already told you about how many of my new students drop out that go into progress and academic and progress probation in one. I also know about 16% of my new freshmen drop out before they even get to that point. First semester, they enroll in August, and by November, when it's time to re-enroll, 16% have already dropped out again. Maybe a Summer Bridge program or a First Year Experience program can keep those students on focus and keep them in college longer. Develop better methods of assessment for college readiness. I'm happy to say that the State Chancellor's Office is working right now on a grant program, working with a gentleman named Connolly, who's out of Oregon, I believe. He's got some great materials on college readiness, and the state's looking seriously at coming up with some better ways to assess college readiness beyond academic skills and placement type assessment. Don't wait. Start doing some research. Start thinking about that. We know that a lot of students stop out not because of their academic progress, but because of their motivation, their lack of commitment, their personal life, working, health, family issues, drug, alcohol, jail. I mean, all those other things that can influence a student and their ability to stay in school. So let's look at better methods of assessment for that. The use of technology to reach more students and provide more resources that will support them. Web-based information, podcasts, integrated student ed plans, degree audit systems, online services and resources. Again, using that technology to reach more students and get them the information they need when they need it. Working with our instructional faculty to identify programs of studies and course sequences that will serve as a career pathway. Create a template, automate those things. Certificate programs are a great example. We pretty much know what you need to take for an 18-unit certificate. If a student comes in and says, you know, I want a certificate in early childhood education, we can map that out pretty easily. If they come in and now with our new SB 1440, our transfer degrees, again, we can identify what courses they need to take and in what sequence. You match that up with assessment. You can come up with a pretty good ed plan early on. But again, I'm going to mention they've got to have that goal, and that's where you all as career counselors come in. We've got to have that goal in order to have a plan. But the more templates and the more of these pathways that we can identify, the more information students are going to have. Let's get those pathways driven all the way down like they're doing under the SB 70 program in some places, down into the high schools, where you can see the clear path in high school right on into college. Develop and offer more student success courses. This is a tough time to get FTE to offer any additional classes. But I know if you're at this college, I have so few student success classes. I can only serve handfuls of students compared to the number who need it. So let's try to prioritize and offer more student success courses. Maybe make it mandatory for some students as one of those interventions. Support students immediately and intervene early as well. I mentioned this again. Anything we can do to make those freshmen feel special. I know here I had a student come in and ask for a letter of admission. We don't do letters of admission here at community college. They needed it for a scholarship. So we do have a letter that says they're enrolled, but it's not a letter of admission. It's really exciting. It's like a rite of passage when you get those letters of admission, and now you're a college student. I think we could step up and maybe do something for those freshmen so that they're clear that they're a college student now and that we mark that occasion in some way and continue to monitor them through that first couple of semesters. Customize our programs for students who face the greatest challenges to access and success. We already have the data that shows that there's an achievement gap. Those students aren't going to do any better under the Student Success Act if we don't do something to support them. So use the data that you have already available to you to come up with programs to better address the challenges of those students who already are challenged for access and success. Our Latino students, African American students, economically disadvantaged students, single parents, students returning to the to school after years of being away. All of those students need special support. Teach the soft skills sought by employers, courses, workshops, or integrate them as student learning outcomes into regular courses. These could be institution-wide. These could be program SLOs. These could be student service SLOs. The idea is, again, to integrate these into all that we do. Establishing internship, work experience, and maintenance employment opportunities related to the career goal while attending school. Most of our students are working anyway. A lot of them are in what I would characterize as maintenance jobs. They just need the income. It's not necessarily related to their major or their course of study. If we can move towards that type of an experience, it will better support their career choice and/or the changes they may need to make if they find that it's not where they really want to be. So the more we can do there, the better. Develop a safety net of related career and job options for students who may not complete their program. There's some good research out recently from the Research Professionals Group, the RP group, about, it's called their Leavers study. It's basically was a very comprehensive study of students who did not complete certificate programs, career technical education programs. And what they found was that most of them were working. Most of them were working in the field in which they had taken that certificate. They just didn't complete the certificate yet. So we could have a safety net of jobs, which then again may encourage them to complete their education and/or return to education more quickly. Let's all advocate for more career technical education programs and adult basic education. The LAO recently came out with some recommendations regarding adult basic ed. They've taken huge cuts in their budget. The programs have been gutted. Many of them are operated by K-12, but there are some operated in the community college. We absolutely need some kind of a bridge to better prepare those students that need that level of academic preparation. So let's advocate for more career tech and more adult basic education. And let's get creative with some of the instructional methodologies. Speak up and get involved. There's a number of opportunities to do that at the state level. I mentioned there are 2 task force meeting right now. 2 more are going to meet in the spring on equity and program forms and processes. The State Chancellor's website, www.ccco.edu. If you go to the Student Services Division page, click on Matriculation or on SB 1456, you'll have access to a lot of resources, including the rosters for the committees that you can have access to provide input. For example, there are regional representatives for the Matriculation Advisory Committee across the entire state. There is someone in your region that you can talk to about what's happening at the state level and to provide your input. The task force members and these groups working on the allocation formula and the changes to Title V are listed on those pages. You can contact them. You can ask them questions. You can provide your input directly to those groups. Secondly, on your campus, you may or may not be very far along with planning for the Student Success Act. If you're not far along, find out who your matriculation professionals are. Go to the Vice President of Student Services if you need to and ask about it. Volunteer to be part of a committee. Set up your own Student Success Task Force. Begin talking about it now. There's enough information about what's required and the time frames here to begin planning today. There's going to be more information coming out as the regulations are changed and approved, as these committees make more recommendations. But the fundamental things are in place now. Every new student is going to need orientation, assessment, counseling, and an ed plan before they register. That's enough to get started on the conversation. So step up, participate in those planning groups on your campus. Also, the Matriculation Professional Association that I'm president of, we're revamping our website right now, but feel free to contact us. We do have a web page. You can get there. Don't be shy. Send me an email. I'll put you back in touch with your regional reps if that's the best way to do it. we know all the regional reps. I sit on the Matriculation Advisory Committee myself. We just met 2 weeks ago, and we're meeting again the first week of February. So we do listen to your input. I think that's about it on the information. We'll go to questions now.
Okay, thanks, Aiden. That was such a lot of great information. Really appreciate it. I only have one posted question for you. So before I ask you that question, I just want to announce several people posted and asked if they were going to be able to. Some people were trying to frantically take notes about everything that you were saying. So the presentation, including the audio portion, will be posted on the Career Briefs website first thing Monday morning as soon as I have a chance to edit the video, the audio portion of it. So the question for you, though, Eli, is how does this apply to concurrent high school students? And this question comes from Joanna.
The law itself, Joanna, and everyone else, does not directly apply to concurrent students because they're not regular students until they enroll after high school. So they're not considered new community college students while they're concurrently enrolled. Probably the bigger discussion right now is what, if any, enrollment priority concurrently enrolled high school students will have. I know at my district they're about 4th on the list. So right now, the way our courses are, by the time they get to enroll, they have very few options. Most things are closed. I think the other way it affects concurrently enrolled students is, again, on the preparation. If they're already taking classes, I think a lot could be done to utilize their experience as ambassadors to other high school students and build on some kind of a college transition model in the high school where they can be mentors, they could be role models, and they could help pave the way for a lot of other students who are confused and undecided. But right now, they won't be considered officially new students. Even though they will have already completed coursework, they would not be considered a new student until they actually get in. Now, I should mention the law does say that colleges will establish their own exemptions for these services. That might be an exemption that a district might want to propose. You would say, well, any students that have already attended community college through concurrent enrollment would be exempted. That's a possibility. That's a local decision. States hasn't even suggested that yet, but it is a possible way to do an exemption. Then you just have to ask yourself, is it really better for these students to have orientation, assessment, and an ed plan and come back through? Probably a better practice.
Great, thank you. Joanna then commented that their plan is to do a personal development class for students concurrently enrolled to help meet the service requirements for new students. And then we do have another question from Lisa. Lisa wants to know, is in the common assessment, will there be an abbreviated career assessment? How do career counselors give input to this assessment?
Oh, good question. I'll try to give you as much information as I can on the statewide assessment. I do also sit on that committee. We just met, I think it was late November, early December. I don't remember the date. The statewide common assessment that they're talking about now is essentially a placement instrument into English, math type courses. I don't anticipate that it will include any broader career decision-making or career readiness type module. The state's been providing some funding to develop a common ESL test, and that's going to be coming out fairly soon. So we'll see ESL first. The other one, there just isn't enough funding to fully develop the English reading, writing, and math tests, and they will be most likely using, getting proposals from existing publishers of tests, although it will be a custom created test. It won't be one of the current off-the-shelf tests. The state is, however, also looking at, as I mentioned, a grant or a project to work with this gentleman up in Oregon to develop some kind of a readiness assessment. But that right now is not officially part of what is known as the statewide CCC assess model. So that would be something entirely different. Individual colleges and districts, you still, right now, you know, some districts have had flexibility to do a lot of different things with assessment under the budget flexibility. That Budget Act language will probably sunset June 30th, and after that date, everyone will have to go back to using the officially approved by the Chancellor's Office assessment instruments, and you do have the option of developing your own career planning, career decision-making, career readiness type assessments. So we still all have the flexibility to do that.
So, Aiden, this is a question from me. I'm a career and tech ed person, and my question is whether the assessments in any way address competencies in technical math or technical writing or reading, which is oftentimes different than academic reading and writing.
Well, the statewide assessments, they have not even begun to construct them.
Okay.
So what will be included or not included is an unanswered question at this time. The ones for reading, writing, and math. Yeah, we don't have any idea right now what the content is. The work groups that got together a couple years ago put in a long wish list of everything they would love to see in those tests, and they did a request for applications to see if any publishers would even respond to it. They did get responses back. Mm-hmm. But there's no funding to actually move forward with developing a test, so nothing finalized yet at all.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's another question now or comment from Anthony. And Anthony says, although there are many mentions of the term quote-unquote career, as in a career plan, planning, etc., throughout the Act, why is it not mandated or worked into the system? They are requiring the English and math pretty straightforward. I'm thinking Anthony's commenting on the fact that there's no career assessment in the assessment planning. Any comments?
The good news is they actually did broaden the language in SB 1456 to include career interest and aptitude type tests. So it's completely allowable under the Act to do that, and potentially would be fundable since it is in the Act. But it's right now not currently incorporated as a component of statewide assessment as they've been defining that at the state level. So when they say if you want to accept these funds, you will be required to use the statewide assessment. Right now, none of those conversations have specifically incorporated anything like a career planning assessment or a career identification assessment. That could come up, and I think it's a really good suggestion. But the state has been so focused on developing the placement instruments, they haven't even gotten into any discussion on a single approach or a statewide approach for career planning and decision making.
Okay, thank you. There aren't any other questions posted, so I don't have any questions. Rita, I don't know if you would like to make any closing comments, Rita?
No, I just want to thank Aiden. That was awesome. Every time I hear it, it really helps me to understand it better, which I really want to reinforce. We'll send out a link to those of you that are on to the career briefs so that you can be able to follow up and listen to this again or look at some of these slides, because Aiden's agreed that he'll also let us post the PowerPoint. So I appreciate that, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a happy holiday.
Yes, you too. Thank you, Rita. That will conclude our webinar for today. Aiden, thank you so much.
Thank all of you, and have a happy holiday.
Okay, thanks, Aiden. Bye.
Bye now.